about to bring on the positive vibe. Wherever we go, we are gonna do.
Oh, hello. We're back. So this is our new format. So if it messes up, then our bad, because
it's all Monica's fault.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. So this is now the Soul Purpose Lounge. And we are, if you missed our first show, the first hour, we were talking about Hamilton. And what were we talking about?
So obviously we took a week off for the holiday last week. And we spent a good part of the holiday really just relaxing and spending time with family.
Mm-hmm. We did.
And my lovely wife decided to watch the television debut of Hamilton on Disney Plus.
Yes, I watched it 8 times
during the weekend. So does that mean that you liked it?
I liked it a lot. I enjoyed it a lot. But so we had a whole conversation during the main show about Hamilton and its impact. And then surprisingly, one of my Facebook friends who I tend to have political, I don't want to say philosophical, but definitely political debates with on a regular and consistent basis. Who I do know is a history lover, and who I do know loves hip hop music, and who I do know also loves Broadway shows.
Uh-huh.
Saw it, commented on it, and said that he liked it. So I said, "What?" So then he said, "Oh," and I said, "We're gonna be talking about Hamilton." He said, "Oh, I gotta be on the show." So I sent him a DM and said, "If you are available on Saturday, we would love to include you in the conversation." So I have absolutely no clue or idea what he's going to say.
It's all right.
Relative to the show.
Look, but we know he's going to bring the funk, though.
He's going to bring the funk. And so I want to go ahead and bring in Mr. Javante Anuabuele. How you doing, sir?
I'm all right. I think that was a perfect introduction explanation.
It's a perfect introduction because it is the truth. So Javante, if you are Facebook friends with either he or I, if he chimes in on my post, we went for 30 minutes.
I'm trolling. I like to troll.
Right? You're not a troll. We went for 30 minutes. What were we talking about the other day? It was
most of the time we are usually saying something like with 95% agreement, and it's the 5% we disagree about.
Right, correct. So, but the other day it was actually pretty funny because it was like a 30-minute conversation, and then come to find out it really was just Supreme Court justices.
Yeah.
So a Supreme Court case, and so Javante's has been riding me because he's a history person. He likes data and he does his research. So I know if I'm gonna debate him that I need to come correct because I just can't rely on my feelings and my wonderful personality to back him down. And he provided me data and stuff. Come to find out at the end that we were saying the same doggone thing. So at any rate,
so let me set this up for anyone who is going to join us, because I know that we get a lot of people who view after the fact, and we see Misha, we see Ruth. We appreciate y'all chiming in. We're gonna try to entertain and enlighten over the course of the next hour or so. But just to set this up a little bit, so we watched Hamilton. Obviously,
we did.
Hamilton has been released to the public. Start out as a play, or actually technically start out as just a poem.
Yeah.
That the producer and the creator of the art form just kind of sprung out there and launched it, debuted it at a. Now, where was he in front of the Obamas at a?
It was a poetry jam that they used to do periodically. I don't know what room it was in, but in the White House.
So he launched it and dropped it. Everybody was impressed by it, and he said then that he was going to release it as that he was working on incubating this play idea to do Hamilton and utilize the hip hop genre to tell this story.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to off-Broadway play to be put together, launched it, was extremely successful. He think they had a theater of about 300 people that was packed like night after night after night after night.
Mm-hmm.
It just got to a point where it's like, look, this is a bigger production than we even thought it would be. And so it went to Broadway, went to one of the major spots, one of the major theaters. But essentially the backdrop is, it is a historical, or based on historical events, telling of the story of one of our founding fathers during the American Revolution. Giving rise to the American Revolution were a group of cats that were like, hey, we need to start formalizing our independence from King George. And so he tells the story of kind of some of the things behind the scenes leading up to that.
Yeah.
And then the rest, as they say, is
history.
Is history.
So I know there's been a lot of, and I'm focused, but I'm trying to find the link on here so I can share. But anyway, so there's been a lot of criticism about Hamilton because of the historical inaccuracies, right? So, and I did not go in expecting it to be a biography, an accurate biography of Alexander Hamilton. I just did not. I tuned in because I like music. I like musical theater.
Oh, it's just me on here.
Oh, I'll be back. We're back.
Oh, okay.
Hold on. The camera unplugged. Oh, wait a minute. It's coming back. It's coming back. I touched it and I messed it up. Sorry. My bad. Sorry. It's us. Hold on. I'm back. We're back. Okay. There we go.
See us.
We're back. That was my fault. I got too excited and I touched the thing.
Stop touching the thing.
I'm sorry. Okay. So anyway, so the criticism has been it was not historically accurate, but I didn't watch it for the historical accuracies. I didn't think it was going to be an accurate biography of Alexander Hamilton or anything. I watched it because of the music and it was Black and brown people. Mm-hmm. So Devontae, I know that you are a history person. I know you like hip hop. I know you like musical theater. What was were you initially drawn to want to watch Hamilton? Like, did you see it on Broadway?
No, I didn't see it on Broadway. I was initially drawn to try to see it on Broadway because of those facts that I love her history. Grew up in musicals, grew up in hip hop, so I was like, oh, okay, I'm interested. But when the Broadway tickets were hitting for like $800, I was like, nah, this is
right.
$800.
It was $800. Yeah.
Broadway with the original cast, it was like $800, and there was like. It was gonna be like a wait, and I had to like finagle some stuff to get somebody else's tickets and all of this because it was like sold out when it hit Broadway for like a good year. So yeah, so but I definitely wanted to see it initially, but after that, then my mind just went somewhere else. I was like, man, this is probably white. They probably don't know nothing about hip hop. This is probably whack anyway. I don't want to see it. Some co-opted again, some type of assimilation. We've seen those type of, I kept envisioning like a musical about a historical figure that was more like Bring It On.
Right.
Which was like, so I lost interest. But when it was coming on Disney Plus, I was like, okay, well, definitely want to see it now to see what all of the hype and the fuss was. And then because I grew up in musicals and the arts, some of the traveling cast members I actually know.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I actually know enough where, I'm like friends with them on Facebook or follow them. Mm-hmm. So I have been seeing like backstage snippets, and I see like they doing ciphers and, like sort of true to the artist. I was like, oh, this might not be so corny. So I was definitely excited to at least watch it, but I still went in with a lens when I turned it on Disney Plus and push play. I was still expecting to hate it. I was still expecting to be like, this is whack. Right. But after the first number, not going to give away my shot.
Not going to miss my shot or whatever.
Yeah. After that, I was like, oh, this is legit. Real. And the criticism of it's a new thing. Like everyone has a platform to say something, right? And I think this is why I always like to fall back on history. But how many biopics or just based on historical events or anything where they're not telling the full story because you can't tell a full story, Right. The inaccuracies is a stretch. I don't think there are any inaccuracies. There's some interpretations where you can assume some things were said by Hamilton that weren't said, or that he was big up in some things that he actually didn't big up. But in terms of telling the story of what I knew, and I didn't know as much, but I knew, generally that he was shot in a duel and his son was shot in a duel. And, that time frame, I knew that. I knew he was kept out of he was supposed to be the second president. Right. But I knew he was kept out because of a scandalous affair. So that, they hit the major points of his life. Folks say, oh, he was black. No, he was not black. At best, he was like a octoroon, as what they used to call him.
So that was the question that I had, was whether, because that was unclear for me. It was whether or not he was because I know he was born in the Caribbean, St. Kitts, I think.
Yeah.
And I was unsure whether or not he was biracial, because that was unclear.
I mean, he was, at best, his mom was like mixed, but they say she was like a quarter black. So at best, he was sort of
okay. Here was that.
Yeah. So it is some. I mean, everybody is some black folks in him, but it ain't. He was not like, his mama was black, daddy was white. Yeah. He wasn't black. Yeah, he wasn't Sally Hemings.
So right. So one of the biggest criticisms, that I've seen is the fact that they don't have a legitimate conversation, or so the comment is that they've erased slavery from the conversation. For there's no mention, with the exception of maybe two. Yeah. There's a reference to Sally Hemings, and then in the scene where he and Thomas Jefferson are debating the Treasury, or kind of the formula of the Treasury, he makes some reference, which is apparently really in the paperwork. And if you do some research on Hamilton, that he has like 25 essays where he is really digging into Thomas Jefferson and his hypocrisy. But the argument and the criticism has been that there was no comment or conversation about slavery. And so for me, I didn't necessarily take issue with that, because I know who Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were. They were slave owners. There's no romanticizing about the fact that they were, evil people relative to that. So did that give you any pause or misgivings about?
No, and this is something I was talking with my wife about. I think that especially educated Black folks, we oftentimes romanticize America to an extent that is detrimental for us. And what I mean by that is, I don't think we like to admit, we usually try to paint it as two forms of passion. We hate it or love it. There's a villain, there's a hero. Large part of this history has been just the ignorance, the straight ignoring of Africans in this country.
Right.
So in fact, at Harper's Ferry, after the John Brown raid, they had a big meeting, and they were like, all right, what are we going to do with Black folks? We were about to go into the war, and the decision that came out of it is like, we could do a whole bunch of stuff, but it's actually going to be much cheaper if we just ignore them.
Right.
So that's really in the forming of this country, and especially what they were fighting against, you had what ended up being the southern colonies and the southern states. They wanted to go to war with Britain, not because of the taxes on tea and all these other things that were happening, but they wanted to go because Georgia, which is named after King George, they were Georgia was founded as a free colony. No slaves were initially allowed in Georgia. And so they knew that, the British Empire was outlawing slavery. in the rest of their colonies, and it was coming to the States. So they were ready to go to war for that fact.
Right.
The ones in the North had other reasons. In New England, New York, and Philadelphia, they had other reasons to go to war, but they all wanted to go. The reason they connected was because they all wanted to go to war against Britain for that. That was the only connected thing. The ones in the North knew that whether they felt it was a moral dilemma for enslavement or not, they knew that the money that was in the country was coming that way. The riches were coming that way. And so they had to delicately talk around if they were talking. So John Adams, who was definitely against slavery, he still couldn't really speak out about it. He wrote a lot in his diary later on when he was president about how he was moving in. He was the first one in the White House, how he didn't feel comfortable moving into this house that slaves built and how much he was against it. But we didn't see a true abolitionist come in the form of a president until his son came.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like the fifth or sixth president, so it was, a lot of it about the conversations that were happening were accurate. Yes, slavery was going on, but if you were from the North, it wasn't really a big point.
Right.
We're going to be talking about this is first and foremost on our mind.
Right. And I think when you dig a little deeper, because one of the pushbacks I had for people that were saying, I can't watch it, which is fine. That, I respect people's opinion and positions about not wanting to watch the show, but I want people to do it with a complete understanding of the fact that the creator, Lin-Manuel, was not attempting to be historically. He's an artist, right?
Right.
So he thought that the story of Hamilton as an immigrant who came, who worked hard and studied and was just a ferocious writer, kind of worked his way up to be the secretary for Washington, was a phenomenal story because he's an immigrant. And Lin-Manuel's, I don't know if he's born in Puerto Rico, but his parents were born in Puerto Rico. So that was what drew him in. And for me, I applauded him for being courageous, may not be the right word, but we'll say courageous enough to write a story and then put Black and brown actors in the roles of Washington and Jefferson and Madison, and then the women, right? So he didn't have to do that. But I want people to kind of understand, to your point, looking through the lens. I mean, Hamilton was his family owned slaves. His wife's family owned slaves. But if you do research, he wasn't an abolitionist, but he did agree with slavery, right? Now, was he complicit because he didn't push back?
It was beyond complicit, because didn't he actually arrange for slaves for? Didn't he like work behind the scenes to kind of arrange for his in-laws to get slaves?
There kind of. So his wife had slaves. I think he may have worked with them, but there's writings that demonstrate that he just was not in favor of the institution of slavery. Now, whether or not he pushed back enough, probably not. I mean, but there's plenty of liberal.
So he was a merchant.
Yeah,
and some of the goods on merchant ships were enslaved Africans. So, and I'm not trying to downplay it. I mean, it's like if you're in that business and you broke. I mean, if you get a whole shipment of something and it's like 2 kilos of cocaine in there, like, are you a drug dealer? John Forte, one of the greatest lyricists of all time. John Forte went to jail and had to get his sentence commuted by George Bush,
right?
Because he ain't selling no drugs, but he was telling. I know somebody that knows something about it. So he went to jail for it. So is he right? No. Was Hamilton right? But was he like, can you paint him as like, oh yeah, he was a slave owner? No.
Yeah, no. I mean, so I think so. To me, what was interesting, and I know that you said that you had some views and vibes, Javante, about kind of your perception or your interpretations and your feelings about the show. So I'm gonna let you share them because I got to run before our computer dies and get a cord. But one of the things that the only pushback I would have about the play was I didn't think that they gave the women enough. I think they made them strong, but I think they could have made them stronger, right? So I think that they tend to play more of a supportive role for the founders, and I think they probably had, if I did more reading, I'm going to do more reading. I think they probably had more of an impact than was really explored in the play.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, we did see. I think we saw a documentary post the release this week, where they were talking to the actors. They were also talking to historians, and the historians did I think a pretty good job of pointing out that the significance of the female character in this story eventually really kind of followed suit to the history of our country, which is, they were portrayed as kind of the wife of, but then the wife actually went on to live another 50 years,
right.
Died, and worked not only to uphold his honor and uphold his good name, if you will, but really just have a host of accomplishments on her own. But the memorial to the Alexander Hamilton Memorial, which is wherever that's located,
it's in Washington, I think.
In Washington,
but don't quote me on that.
Has the
wherever Trinity Church is, I think it's in New York City. Big,
huge, concrete, stone, metal monument of him, and then or maybe this is their gravesite.
It's their gravesite.
The gravesite, and then hers, which is right next to his. This woman who 50 years after he died is just kind of the flat, just kind of hole in the ground with stone on the top.
And probably, frankly, did more to cement his legacy. I think he would have been known as the founder just because he's on documents.
Right.
But I think that she probably in that 50 years did more to cement his legacy than he could have in his short period of time. So I thought that I thought that he did a good job of, because I didn't know who any of the Schuler sisters were. So I thought it was good that we were introduced to those people. But if I had one gripe about it, it wouldn't be the slavery concept, just because I had an appreciation for who these people were before I saw the show. It would be that I thought he probably could have built up the female characters a little bit more, just in my opinion.
And now Misha's asking, do we know if he became an abolitionist later?
No, he didn't. He was, no.
He did have friends who were, right? So the Laurent's character is a real character. Is this white man that they used to tease. They called him, all types of names, mulatto and everything else. But he was a white man who really did want to have a free Black regiment, early on, right? So he was going to do that in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. He had other friends who were abolitionists, but he himself was not.
Yeah. So I think all of them were flawed, for sure. So I'm interested, Javante, kind of getting. You said on your post that you said something about tropes. I need to find it to see what you said on my post, and I talked about who's going to find it, who's going to talk about it. But I'm interested in kind of knowing outside of the slavery conversation. There's some criticism about portraying him as an immigrant, particularly in this time. I think when you're kind of looking at it through different lenses, when you looked at Hamilton through the lens during the Obama administration, I think that people still had criticism about it not being historically accurate. Mm-hmm. But now when you're looking at it through the lens of where we are currently, I think the criticism is because you have this whole cancel Hamilton. I saw cancel Hamilton on Twitter. So they trying to cancel Hamilton. Right. So looking at it through the lens of what we have going on now, one of the things I said in the main show is that I think that there are some lessons that the current day folks who are in part of this revolution pushing back against the structures that make up this country, that they can learn from what happened when this country was created. And I don't know whether you agree with that, if that question made sense. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but.
Yeah, I agree with it. I think I saw Charlie Rose before he became not okay. I think I saw an interview with him and Lin-Manuel Miranda talking about it. And, the whole thing of Hamilton as an immigrant is definitely taking some artistic license, which is okay in art too. Did he technically migrate in from somewhere else? Yes, but when he did that, there was no country, right? So he wasn't necessarily because everybody was a lot of folks were immigrants if you look at it that way. But he but he was telling the story in the interview that I saw. He said something I thought was pretty poignant. He said Hamilton is a musical about the people of America then told by the people of America now.
Oh,
which is pretty poignant to me. It's like, okay, so he's gonna take the artistic license. He's gonna say, look, even this guy was immigrant, so hey, immigrants, we get the job to, what I mean? He got the right to say that. One of my favorite when Kanye and Jay-Z had that album, and he's like, not bad for some immigrants. Like, clearly we know we're not immigrants.
Right.
That's not our story, but he made a dope line in a song. Like sometimes you just got to take art for what it is.
Yeah.
And be like, we're going to reflect these things that you say when you say, when Rick Ross say Maybach music, that don't mean he really made the music in the Maybach. You know what I'm saying? Like, people gotta, like, just from an art perspective, like people play into, oh, you heard what he just said? That was, come on, man, it's art. You know what I mean? It's a poetic license, actually.
But people, I'm telling you, people are, they really are bothered at the fact that they feel that they are romanticizing. I may have said this already, but romanticizing folks who just fundamentally were just bad people with respect to Black people. And then actually on one of the documentaries on Disney Plus, the guy that plays Leslie Odom said who I thought was phenomenal. Leslie Odom said that he was doing a workshop, or maybe he was doing an interview, and a young lady who may have been a college student came up to him, or somehow he got the message that she was bothered and said, because they were talking about, Hamilton being revolutionary, etc., the play being revolutionary. And her comment was, it's not revolutionary. It's just Black people telling white people stories. Right. So another criticism is you have Black folks. Right. And I think you mentioned this in the show. You got Black folks telling white folks' story, even though their story is erased. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with. I
don't feel that at all because when KRS-One went through you Must Learn, or when the Fat Boys did the table is white, the pink, these are all, like, hip hop is an art form that can be used for many things.
Right. Yeah.
To me, they stay true to the art form of hip hop, telling these stories. You can tell stories about a lot of things. So Black folks can't tell white stories. White folks always trying to tell Black stories, or you know what I mean? It's like, so the power in it was for people who usually turn off history. You got to like really be into it, like a nerd, because you don't see a reflection of yourself in any way. So these folks were obviously not on our side of history. I always am talking about, sort of whatever to these founding fathers, 12 of the first 14 presidents owned slaves. So fuck, excuse me. But at the same time, it would be crazy to think that they were not dynamic men.
Right.
Yeah.
They founded a country.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and so we can't tell that story. Like, we could tell that story. Yeah, we know, you know what I'm saying? That we can know both sides of that history, and the fact that they did it the way that they did it, with not only just, it wasn't just a musical, they used hip hop to do it. Mm-hmm. And they true to the art form, and they were giving us shout outs in the middle of telling this story. You hear Brand Nubian, you hear Mobb Deep, I'm only 19, but my mind is older. You hear all of this stuff that makes it real to us in a different way. Right? In fact, if you were telling, if somebody got in, if somebody was in high school, you know, undergrad, grad, doctorate program, and they put this script on the table to tell the life of it, they're getting an A. They're getting
they are.
because like, all right, so check it. Boom, this is what happened. All right, so this is he put it in the language that we could understand the history of somebody, and then put it in into a musical, which was like, it was amazing to me for that.
Yep.
So let me interject something I brought up in our show from this morning. And it probably comes across as a criticism, but it's really kind of more of a, hey, have we thought about, right? Like, if we invest 6 years into crafting a story so brilliantly told as this particular story was, and I mean all of the alliteration and the Broadway musical, all of that stuff, you know, kind of putting it together, should we not be encouraging, and are we encouraging? Because I haven't heard. I would have loved to see this same genre used instead of Hamilton is the name of it, but Harriet is the name of it. And so now people are like, well, Harriet, oh, you mean like Harriet Tubman? Oh yeah, we know who Harriet Tubman was. She was a woman who freed the slaves. Yeah, but then there's all of these other nuances about her, about who she was and what she did and how she did it. And how many people she impacted and all that kind of stuff, that even little white kids. And when I say little white kids, I mean, right now we have chorus, you know, little white kids in chorus who are singing the Hamilton songs and all of that kind of stuff. Like, how cool would it have been to launch this, and would it have still been as popular as if Hamilton would have been named Harriet, and all of these lyrics and everything else would have been, oh man, so now we really know who Harriet Tubman was, or Mary McLeod Bethune, or whoever.
So the thing I say that is, okay, then let's do it. Then somebody do that, because art is intellectual, but we cannot intellectualize art. It doesn't come from that place.
Yeah.
So I'm also a spoken word artist. I got 3 albums.
Yeah.
All of these things, and I've written tons of poems, won plenty of awards, and at one point in time in my life, I was internationally renowned for my poetry. I have yet to write a poem about my daughter. And I mean, if you a daughter, if you a man with a daughter, a child, that love is like a different type of love.
Right.
I've never written a poem about her just because it hasn't come that way. It hasn't come for me that way. I written one about my son, my wife, my mom, dad, brothers, sister. I haven't yet to write a poem about my daughter. And so, and I'm not saying, it's on, you never know the genesis of what's gonna spark that true creation of saying, oh, I can ride with this here. He found that book on his way on a vacation.
Yep.
And then was like, dang, let me get my pen out. It was after reading the book. It wasn't like, oh, I'm planning to definitely just go in on Hamilton. This was somebody I felt like should be studied. Yeah. And I'm not saying that that's not the case for like Harriet or whoever. I would love a musical about David Walker, but the thing about it is, if that's what we want, then somebody else has to get that bug.
Yeah.
And we can still be like, okay, this by itself is still a great piece of art. Book of Mormon is something I have nothing in common with, could care less about, but that was a great musical.
I never saw it, but I want to see it.
Yeah, it's a great musical. And I mean, they're clowning the Mormons mainly, but the way that they did it, I mean, it was great, Cats. They made a musical about cats. You know what I'm saying? It's like about nothing, really.
Yeah, right.
But it's in terms of the art form, it was still incredible. So we could just be like, oh, in terms of the art form, this was an incredible piece. Yeah. Without it having to check all the boxes to make the whole world feel good about it.
Right.
And this is coming from somebody who makes everything African-centered in his life. So,
which is why I was so shocked that you liked it. Other than the fact that it's Black people, I was like, Devontae ain't gonna really. Based on me just kind of reading your post, he ain't gonna like this. But you shocked me. So somebody did have a question though, because we talked about the question that was asked previously was whether or not Hamilton was an abolitionist, and you and I both said no. Later on, and you and I both said no. And she mentioned manumission, which is different, I think, than abolition, because manumission is it's not saying get rid of slavery totally. It just is you have a slave, but here's a process by which you can free your slave, which is different than abolitionist, which is don't do it at all.
And the law on the book, and manumission is really some perverted stuff, honestly, because the laws on the books were meritorious manumission. Right. At the time where Alexander Hamilton may have been framing those laws and helping with that, which basically said if your slave, your enslaved, property did one of the following things, you could have the right to free them, because the laws were originally written in Virginia, especially, as any black person here is about to be a slave.
Right.
That's the only black people allowed in the state are enslaved Africans. So you couldn't, even if you wanted to, if you got struck by lightning, free your slaves legally until they created meritorious manumission. And what that says is, you can, if your property saved your life somehow, so if a tree fell on you and they got it off you, that could be a reason.
Yeah.
If they invented something and it led for profit for you, or if you were like a widow and your husband, the planter, actually died, and you didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore, you could do it from these ways. So this was meritorious manumission.
Right.
And so it was like, basically, if a super nigger exists, then you can free them.
You can free them. Right.
Yeah. So he was supportive of that.
Slavery as an institution is wrong. It's illegal, and we're not going to. Yeah, it's more.
Yeah. So he was supportive of that. So to me, that's like, no, you ain't no abolitionist.
But that also coincides with, we're talking about the person who's essentially founded, the Treasury, the United States Treasury. So so it also it aligns with, philosophically, if this person exists that somehow benefits you financially, right? Then it's okay for them to be. So it really kind of aligned with his own morals and ethics, which is we have to make sure above anything else that we establish a system of capitalism that can sustain our new our new
and that's why I said, I think, to me, when you dig deeper, because I love music, I love art, I'm not a poet, but I love poetry, and I love English, right? And so one of my favorite things in high school was just kind of taking a play, either a Shakespearean play or some other book, and really kind of dissecting it. One of the things that stood out to me was how the superficial the flaws of the people was obvious. But then you dig deeper, Hamilton's flaws. So you have Burr, who was so supremely flawed because he was consistently and constantly trying to be relevant. So like I want to be in the room where it happens. His issue the whole time was, he started out as this person everybody looked up to, and then folks kind of left him because he was refused. He played Switzerland the whole play. He was in a position on anything. Right. And then Hamilton's flaw, to me, and y'all, both of y'all watched it, was the fact that he wrote so much, which was a good thing. That's a positive thing. But his ego was so large, and he was so focused and concerned about his legacy, right? And maintaining his legacy, that he wrote the damn Reynolds papers and told everything about his damn affair, which really no one cared about, So, and I guess it was to get in front of the story and to kind of control the narrative. But it ended, he didn't think it through. So I'm going to control the narrative by getting out in front of it and telling everything, not having an appreciation for the fact that it's going to hurt your wife, it's going to hurt your family. If you have aspirations to be president, that's shot in the dark, which I actually thought was pretty funny, since Thomas Jefferson was sleeping with Sally Hemings, and that probably was problematic as well. But nevertheless, but to me, what was more interesting, other than the superficial flaws that everybody saw, was Hamilton's individual flaw. Sure, he was complicit in slavery, he didn't do enough, but his flaw of, because he didn't come from anything, his desire to create and maintain his legacy ended up with he could have probably done more, but for the fact that he was so focused on maintaining the purity of his legacy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that was my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that anybody who writes that much got a huge ego. You know, that's number one. Number two, you know, the parts of the story that I did know previously is it was more induced. They sort of played it a little bit where Burgess left it like, oh, you know, rumors. But Burr definitely was putting it out there.
Oh yeah. When I read it,
and so Hamilton was like, and it wasn't only his ego. He was also like very, you know, he was always ready for a fight. So like, well, I'm gonna one up you in this fight.
Yeah.
This is the one thing that's hurting me. You ain't never been nothing, no way. So I'm gonna just put this out here, and you know, from that standpoint. But it was focused a lot on, you know, I ain't never had nothing, so I'm gonna go after it. Where you know his flaw, you know, he had a lot of flaws. He did get kicked out of the Continental Army at first because he was too ambitious. He was, and so I think that ambition is something that he still had his. I think he thought if he got out in front of it, people would still respect him enough for the presidency.
Right.
And, you know, that really took him out. He was very upset about it. They didn't play it up as much. But he was very upset that he was never president because of that.
And it's so funny that back then his indiscretion caused him not to be president, and we got a whole philanderer with 50 million baby mamas and children.
Yeah,
president of the United States now. Which
is funny. Is the history of the United States in general is hilarious, but you know the word of the year is definitely unprecedented.
Entanglement? Oh, unprecedented.
We're not going there.
Entanglement is the word of the history of human beings. Like that's not a big deal, honestly. But it unprecedented. And Trump is now. You know, I was always like, man, Trump, whatever, you know. But the handling of this pandemic is just like above everything else. And the blatant. Man, the way he let Roger Stone off, this lady, what's the name's girlfriend that's locked up right now? She might be dead today. It ain't gonna last like 2 more weeks. It's like now this. I think what Lin-Manuel Miranda, you know, what he did was he saw, man, this could be like a play or something. You know, the way his life read, and I think we are living in that time right now where it's like. This is a movie. This is a like
right. And we don't know the end. That's the crazy part. We don't know the end. And so it's funny because when one of the articles I was reading was talking about the lens through which I think they talked about in the documentary, the lens through which you're seeing Hamilton is you have to it's 2 different lenses. Right. The first time it was out, you looked at it through the lens with Obama in the presidency. Mm-hmm. Now we're looking at it through the lens of Because this gives you more appreciation if you like history about how, to Javante's point, how badass these dudes were that figured out, you know what, screw the monarchy. We're going to create this country and with the premise of democracy where everybody has a say, whether or not that's true or not in actual, you know, in practice, whether or not that's true. From an ideally, that's kind of what they wanted, where everybody had a say. Yeah. And now you see this person that's in the presidency who is saying, screw you to every norm that they created or thought they wanted to create years ago.
Yeah, I think what is held on to, and this is always where I got off of the train. One of the reasons I didn't major in history, even though I loved it so much. Well, the other reason was, like Hamilton, I ain't come from nothing. So I was like, how can I make the most money? I ain't going to be teaching history. So I got me a good business degree. Need some money. But one of the things I always got off of the boat with history professors, especially about U.S. history or anybody did like U.S. history or civics or anything, is the way they would romanticize the founding of the nation. And I think it's overglorified, but it's still a very important point to hang a hat on, is that you had all these egomaniacs because they were down there. You had somebody that wasn't involved in government who was probably the coldest of them all, Ben Franklin.
Yeah.
You know, but Ben Franklin, they talk about, you know, Jefferson went to France after Ben Franklin had set up those relationships.
Right.
Ben Franklin was over there, you know, owning Ben Franklin was like Biggie
Right.
In the 18th century, so he voted everybody. Everybody loves him. This man is. Oh, that's how you harness electricity. I'm gonna go put that out. You know what I'm saying? He was doing all these other things.
Ultimate statesman.
These people were in one room, and where you get smart people in the room and people who feel like they somebody special, and they came out of the room with something that they agreed on, and then they didn't stand on it, until you had the next generation come. That does say a lot to say, you know what, it's not perfect, but they did do this thing. So, white people hang their hat on that way too much. Like, oh, this is why we're the best nation. It's like, nah, it was dope. It was dope.
But it was flawed at its creation because as I said in the first show, the Southern states wanted representation, in Congress. And in order to get that representation, they didn't have enough white people. They didn't have enough white land owners. You had to use white bodies in order to get that. So you use black bodies to get ultimately what you wanted, but at the same, you're fighting against an oppressor, but you're still oppressing people that you're trying to use to create. It's all jacked up. It's all flawed, but it's what we have, right? It's what we have.
You got all of these people who don't relent and don't compromise with anything. And then you have all these compromises. And I think that's what's being tested right now is you're an idiot in the White House right now. You're probably the dumbest person ever who sat in the White House.
Right.
Him and Andrew Johnson. But even Andrew Johnson had a couple of ideas that it didn't work out in our favor, but were ways to get around, that were smart. Right. But, he's an absolute imbecile and he is unrelenting in anything. Like even against people who are on his side.
He's not compromising at all.
That's testing this whole experiment of America. It's like, okay, I'm waiting for B613 to happen.
So Javante, let me ask you this, because we talked about this a little bit in our first show too. You mentioned Ben Franklin. Like we can put a bunch of people in this conversation. There are statues and monuments standing today that represent all of this institution that we're talking about, which is the founding fathers of our country, going back for the first couple hundred years. I mean, all the way up through the Civil War, right, and the war heroes, if you will. So the young people right now are saying, and I'm not talking about black and brown people. The young people right now are saying, tear these images down. So what about George Washington? Well, what about, Thomas Jefferson? Like, what about the great founding fathers? No, tear it down. Tear all of it down. Let's tear it down. Start from scratch. Give us some perspective on what you're observing with respect to what people are saying.
Monica, I was behaving. I wasn't going to bring it up, but here we go. You keep your statues, your flags, all of that. Where are my reparations? Give me my reparations, because I don't care about these young white people with voices and they feel like, oh no, this isn't right. That is not what we care about. That's not going to be America. Give us the money, give us the land, give us some type of entitlement that you gave everybody else, excluded us from, and then let us symbolically tear down the idea of that's all your court anyway. When I was living in the Netherlands, 2004, 2005, and the Europeans, the ones over there then, they were hot at America then. How's Bush? You guys gonna elect Bush again? He got us war. This is it. And the few Americans that I knew, the white Americans that I knew living in Europe, they were so ashamed and embarrassed. Like, they didn't like to talk about it. They were even like, put a Canada sticker on your backpack when you're traveling so people don't think you're American. I'm like, I don't have them problems. If I don't care about no damn Bush, I'm with the Europeans. And I didn't care about Clinton because all of these things, And so I think that, I know a lot about Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and George Washington and Monroe and Madison. And, I could recite every single president, one through this one here. And I know a lot about those histories because I'm just into history. And I every time I've gone somewhere and be like, this is the place where they talked about, that's interesting to me. I understand the symbolism that it does, but it's nothing of the juice that I've drank to make it a part of me, right? Mm-hmm. And so I understand these white kids drunk it like, oh, this is America's freedom. No, if you want to really show that you really want to change the way of the landscape of America, or you don't agree with what your founding fathers did, then get on this boat of reparations. Otherwise, it's all fodder. It's fodder at the end of the day. People mad at the Confederate flag. And I remember the first time I went to Stone Mountain, I was like 13. I'm from the North, Minneapolis. I'm like, there's a Confederate flag and y'all just want to do a picnic out here? What's wrong with y'all? I get all of that. But in the same breath, every time they were Ku Klux Klan was riding, they had the U.S. flag. Mm-hmm. And every they do so much behind the U.S. flag and the creation of the U.S. flag. That story itself is just like, hey, there's a whole lot about the symbolism of America that really sucks. But the one that sucks the most is the continued oppression of Black folks. So, all that other stuff I could care less about.
Wow. Listen, I am not.
Jamonte's talking about the wealth gap.
Listen, look.
I've made that argument. I've made that argument over and over. I get all of the symbolic changing of mantras and diversity and inclusion statements and all that. I get all that. But until we get serious about the wealth gap in this country and all of the things that go into it, then we're going to be having a lot of symbolic kind of conversations.
Well, and I don't disagree with that. And I've never said no to reparations ever. Yeah. I've never said that.
I know.
My comment to Javante, in the bigger scheme of things, I'm for reparations. Let the record reflect that Monica Harris is for reparations. Give me my money. Run me my funds. My people were emancipated in Escambia County, Florida. My father said that frequently. Can go to we know where they was, right? So I know for a fact that my folks were descendants. I was descendants of enslaved people. But the challenge that I have is unless you vote and unless you participate in the process, even if Congress was able to pass a reparations bill, and let's say that they can pass the bill and we get a president that's going to sign it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You have a Supreme Court and you have a federal court system. Is going to be challenged because white folks ain't gonna give nothing away for free. They're gonna fight. They're gonna fight until they're gonna fight it to the death. They're gonna fight it just like they fought the ACA. They're gonna fight it. It's gonna go to the Supreme Court. And if you don't have a Supreme Court makeup of judges that understand and recognize the importance of reparations, you're gonna continue to have this conversation. So that's a whole conversation for a different podcast. And because you were a reparations advocate, we may have you back on then. But I do want to ask you who your favorite character was. Do you have a favorite character from Hamilton? Because we got a couple minutes left. Not really.
Not really.
No. Did you have a favorite character or characters?
Characters. King George was the character number one. King George, and the song itself, I just keep. So I'm into symbolism, especially when it comes through audio. Right. So what does the music actually say? So, when the Schuyler sisters were getting off with their song, they were doing that to the cadence and everything they were doing. It was Beyonce's Countdown that they were doing.
Oh, they sure were.
Yeah, so it was actually like in there. And so King George, his song was Beatles-esque. Rolling Stones.
Yeah, it was.
It was British invasion music.
It was.
And it was literally the British invasion talking about British invasion, which was like, oh, this is dope. In the lyrics there, he was like, I love you so much, I'll kill your whole family. The problem with imperialism, right? It's like, you're my favorite subject.
Right.
You're my favorite subject.
Right.
Subjugation. I mean, it's like, I thought that was done the best, and then Thomas Jefferson, just because David killed that.
Oh, he killed that. So to me, what was so funny? I'll let you finish. Go ahead.
No, that's what I was just gonna say. Like the fact that he took Thomas Jefferson, because what you have to get across to Thomas Jefferson is in this room full of extremely smart people, Thomas Jefferson was probably the most articulate and smartest of them all.
Right.
And he didn't just get there just because he was naturally gifted like that. He got there because he was born into all this riches and richness and stuff. Like he is absolutely like, everything about aristocracy is Thomas Jefferson, right? So
Right.
you know, and most of the time it's like, oh, you know, you talk about mediocre white males getting this benefit. No, but he was actually really, really smart too. And David was able to do that. He conveyed that, but still keeping it his culture. Like he made it come across like very arrogant, very smart, but it was like a black man telling that, you know, you could still get that.
David probably was out of everybody, I thought he played his characters the best. And Thomas Jefferson, so I have King George, because he just was like the pompous and the arrogant and everything that he just played that part. I forgot Jonathan Geff or whatever his last name is, played that. He just played it phenomenally. But David played the heck out of Thomas Jefferson. And because what made me laugh is he was so like hoity-toity and just kind of pompous and nose in the air, but he kind of played it like a minstrel light because he was jumping around and dancing. It was phenomenal. He played that phenomenally. Now I will tell you though, two of my favorite songs is "Just Say No to This." I just like that vibe. The music was crazy. And the Hamilton remix, Jill Scott does it. Okay. And have you heard the Hamilton remix?
Nah, I haven't. I'm about to go as mental note as soon as this is over.
So the Hamilton remix is hot. And so Jill Scott does the remix of Just Say No to This, and the vibe is funky. It's Jill Scott. And when I heard her sing it, it caused me to question whether or not when Lin-Manuel was writing it, if he was thinking her, because it has kind of like a neo soul type vibe, but she does a phenomenal job on it. But I loved Eliza's character because I thought that she demonstrated a quiet strength, which was probably pretty true to who she was. But if you think about, you know, she was rich, but she kept telling this guy who was super ambitious, "I'm fine with just you." Right? Yeah. I'm satisfied with just you. Her sister, who was extremely aggressive and who was fine, fine, loved her too, was like, he'll never be satisfied. He'll never be satisfied. But her sister was like, I'm satisfied with just you. I don't need a legacy. Yeah. Just come home every night. And that she continued to push that into him. And then when he cheated on her under normal circumstances, now whether this is true or not, whether they took artistic license with this or not, I don't know. Yeah. But the fact that he cheated, she was like, I'm not gonna help you with that legacy on anything. I'm straight on that because I told you I was cool with just you. Yeah. I didn't need all this other stuff. And because you're so ambitious, you created this space for me that you didn't protect me because you told me you were going to protect me. Right. You told my father that you were going to be true. Because there's a lyric in that song, song, you asked her father for her hand. You told my dad you're going to be true. You told my father XYZ, and you didn't protect me. And then their son died, and so they kind of came back together. And then she helped his legacy. In the end, she rode with him. But that's because they shared grief. They shared grief.
Okay, whatever. So listen, I'm gonna let you guys take us out. I know we're coming up to the end of our time. I'm just gonna say, my personal perspective. I thought that it was an extremely, extremely well done, entertaining work of art. Number one. And I like all different types of movies, and obviously I'm not into Broadway musicals, but I thought certainly it was. But music, I'm into different types of genres of music, and I thought it was one of the most well done pieces that I have ever seen.
I'm so proud. Will you go with me to another musical?
Probably not. But I will contend. And here's kind of my final word on the subject is, and I'm going to invite y'all to do the same. I think it was my cousin Joy, who's tuned in watching us now, made a point about any art form that really kind of wants or encourages you to know more. It's done its job, right? Yeah. So I think to that extent it does have some redeeming value, but I still contend that I would have loved to see, and I still want to see. I want to see artists. I want to see folks like Lin-Manuel. I still want to see cats like that actually get really, really creative about how do we educate brown kids about their history. And
maybe I'll do it, man. I got bars, man. I might hit that. I might hit that link, man. That might be a challenge.
And because the reality is this has opened the window of curiosity about history, about Alexander Hamilton, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine if you do that about Frederick Douglass. Imagine if you can do that about,
or not even Frederick Douglass, just somebody else in the space that in the history books, that's Black, that folks don't like. The thing that was so moving to me, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm done. That
was so intriguing to me is the fact that I knew about Alexander Hamilton, but I didn't know as much as I knew about Alexander Hamilton until Hamilton. And so I appreciate your perspective, and I agree with you that if you're going to use this hip hop genre, Lin-Manuel's not Black, he's Puerto Rican, he's an immigrant, so he's going to tell a story that's true to what he's interested in. But presumably, but if somebody like Javante or somebody else who loves Black people and loves Black history and is a poet and has prose and loves music and is able to put that together, can tell a story about someone that's not well known, then to me that is similar. Like folks that know about Alexander Hamilton, everybody's talking about Alexander Hamilton and walking around singing Alexander Hamilton songs, right?
Right.
If you can use that same format and that same, because it's already been said, use that same format to tell a story about somebody in Black history that nobody know about that should be celebrated. Right. To me, you have people walking around singing, we know about Fannie Lou Hamer, but some people don't know about Fannie Lou Hamer. So you can have folks walking around doing, hip hop into a song about Fannie Lou.
Tired, but being sick and tired, that's a hit.
That's a whole song, Javante.
Yeah. Take that mystical sample. Sick and tired. Yeah, that's it right there. We on it.
Well, I agree. I just gave my closing thought.
All right.
Javante, do you have a closing thought, Javante?
To leave for our thousands and thousands of listeners.
11 right now, but we may have thousands after.
I don't have anything else. It's history, hip hop, musical theater. I was all in. They did it right. I do want to say that from the hip hop perspective as well, especially as like a purist around the lyricists and all that, they got a stamp of approval by the Roots and Black Thought. Yeah. So it's like, I should have known then it was serious, but I was still like, nah, but they did that. I was like, they did it right. I could expect more out of it.
Yep.
So I'll take us out on this one. This was a part of the documentary where the artists were talking about Busta Rhymes having front row seats to the performance and coming back, several times, and eventually just kind of coming not even to watch the performance, but just to kind of hang out with the cast behind the scenes and making a comment to them. Really, me being here and seeing what y'all are doing lets me know that I got to work harder. And we're talking about somebody who, you're talking from a lyrical standpoint, he brought it, right?
Yeah, so I got to write more.
I got to write more. I got to work harder. I got to get better at what I do. So, so to that extent, hey, it was definitely a fantastic work of art. Javante, brother, man, look, we're going to continue to have you join us because we just love hearing your insights. We want to keep us abreast of the journey because I know it's only just begun for you. So for sure, just keep us posted. And for all of I didn't mean to say tongue in cheek, thousands and thousands of people, because that's real. We have had thousands and thousands of you go back and relook at our broadcast. You are sharing it. This is happening organically. We couldn't really ask for much more than that. But we do want to hear from you. Put comments go to our Facebook page at Soul Purpose.
And we have a YouTube channel now too. So
and we're on YouTube right now.
We're
live on YouTube. So by all means,
you're big time now, man.
We're trying.
Man, we're trying to get there. And it's due to folks like you.
I can't quit my job though, so I don't know how big we are just yet.
I can't quit my job right now. Talk to my wife. I'm trying to get her. We get on, but we argue too much just to be on it. Y'all keep it together.
Look, that's because y'all don't see the background. When the camera's on, we know you got to be focused. We can't be doing all that, fussing. But behind the scenes, when this go on, you should just shut up and stop talking. Just let me talk. Right. So
Javante, we do have a couple of our viewers that have asked more about how to get closer to you. Is there a website or something that you can take people to be more exposed to some of the art that you've produced?
Oh, there is.
Last
I have
time.
to send a link.
Okay.
Send us the link. We'll put it on our site, and that way you come to Soul Purpose Show, our Facebook page, on Instagram, and we'll have that information for you, and you can hear more from Javante and his lovely wife, both two gifted artists
and rattlers
and business people, and we really appreciate everyone. We encourage you to stay safe, wear your mask, socially distance. We're going to get through this in the next several months. I know we're going to get through it, but everybody be safe.
Thank you.
Right.
See y'all later.
All right.
Bye.
Wherever we go, we about to bring on the positive vibe.